Welcome to the Mental Health Matchmaker podcast. I'm your host, Jess, and today I'm chatting with Erin, a trained and licensed therapist who supports both adults and teens with burnout, neurodiversity, ADHD, and being a part of or supporting a loved one in the LGBTQ plus community. Let's get into our conversation.
This whole idea that it becomes this vicious circle where it's like, I have too much to do. I can't do it all. I can't possibly make it. I can't afford to rest. I can't stop. So then that constant work cycle leads to that burnout. It's self-reinforcing. And I think that's really what happened to me. And that's what's happened to a lot of my clients and people that I support. For me, it was in my personal life. I think not a lot of people realize that you can burn out in other ways than just work burnout. Parenthood is massive. You can burn out in relationships where you're just constantly working and working and working to make it better, and it's the things you're doing aren't actually helping. Parenthood is so hard too, because you get stuck in this kind of mentality that you have to sacrifice for your kids, which I mean is true to a certain extent, but that guilt for taking a rest, that guilt for doing things that give you life that maybe might take you away from your kids a bit sometimes, that's real. That's a real thing. And that guilt about keeping your house just so, and nutritious meals and all those things. So when you start to feel that buildup of all the pressure and all the work, your natural inclination is not to go rest. It's not to go restore yourself. It's, well, I just have to work harder. I just have to push through it. And that's where burnout comes in.
Yeah. And I feel like it can be easy to add even more things to your plate when you're in that state of stress of being like, but then there's this thing I need to do and this email I need to send, or this part of the house that still hasn't been cleaned. And I feel like it can really become such an overload of stress that it becomes hard to wind down from that and give ourselves that grace or give ourselves that time off or that moment of let's just like let the to-do list exist and just focus on ourselves. Like you said, it can be challenging.
Absolutely. A lot of people come in and they want to bypass emotions, because in our society we label emotions good and bad, right? And there's these emotions that we have been sort of taught, maybe not explicitly but implicitly, these emotions are bad, you shouldn't have them. If you feel sad, if you feel angry, if you feel resentful, if you feel jealous, those emotions shouldn't exist. And then we layer on guilt and shame for feeling those things. It's about being human. It's about having the full range of the human emotions, the full human experience. And I think sometimes helping clients to really accept that those difficult emotions are part of human experience allows them not to feel so much distress over having those emotions. It's just like that. Oh yeah, that is being human. I'm trying to be a machine. I really am trying to be a machine. And being human is about resting. It's about playing. It's about connecting with other people as well as work.
I would love for you to speak a bit more about that as well in terms of parenthood, because I feel like when you try to operate as a machine in being a parent, a mother, a father, whatever your role is, that can be a really, honestly, probably scary thing to realize when you take a step back and learn more about burnout.
The really dangerous part about that mentality with parenting is we tend to think that we have to have it all together. We have to be totally calm around our children. We have to not make mistakes, because we're so desperately afraid of causing our children pain or screwing up their future by doing or saying the wrong thing. And something I heard, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact words, but it's just that idea of your children don't need a perfect parent. They just need a parent. They need a parent who's present, who's engaged, who is owning up their mistakes and sort of modeling how to experience those difficult emotions rather than pretending they don't have them.
What have you noticed when clients do need to sit in that? What's that experience like with you?
It takes time. it takes building trust, and you can't just say, oh, you can trust me. You have to really demonstrate it, really build that between a client and a therapist so that they can feel safe having those emotions. And I think a lot of clients on the surface level would say, well, sure, I can experience difficult emotions. Sure, but then when they really start to analyze their patterns and look at what happens when you start to feel that emotion, what do you go to? It's like, as some people don't even realize they've experienced distress because they flip so quickly into that numbness, into that
Mm.
everything's fine. I have so many clients who be like, yeah, it's been a good week, everything's fine. And then they start going into what's happened. And I'm like, are you sure everything's fine? And they're like, actually, no, no, it's
Oh.
not fine. I didn't realize how quickly I go to fine,
Mm.
um, rather than acknowledging some of the hard things that have happened.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about how talking through this in therapy with you would be such a, a unique and really important way to deal with burnout and process it and
Mm,
talk it out, because I feel like it would be really easy to ignore it when you're just in your own thoughts, when you're numbing, when you're reaching for devices.
yeah.
And going to therapy and having to sit there and be like, "Wait, how really was my week?" and saying all this out loud,
Mhm.
I'm sure then has that you have those moments of, wait, this isn't all
Yeah.
fine, like you said.
It can be a really validating experience too, because burnout, it's very insidious. Like, it's very self-reinforcing. I've had lots of clients, and myself included, where you're saying yes to everything. You feel guilty if you say no. You start to feel like, why can't I do all these things? Why can't I live up to this expectation? And instead of lowering the expectations, you push harder, you go further, you raise the expectations. And it's so exhausting, first of all, but also, having a sounding board who can say, why do you feel like you need to do this? Is it actually humanly possible?
Yeah.
Sometimes what I'll pull into it too is like, if a friend was coming to you and saying they're trying to do all this and then add more, what would you say to them?
Mm.
Because we can recognize it in other people way faster than we recognize it in ourselves.
Yeah, it's so true. There's so much of my own life that I am immediately relating to what you're saying, because one of,
Mm,
I think, the most common narratives I hear in my own head is, why can't I do all of this? Why can't I go to a social event for 5, 6 hours and then be able to go to bed, wake up, and immediately get into a workout or get into work mode? And hearing that that is a really
mhm,
common thing that can go through our head, and getting to talk that through in therapy can open that conversation up of, oh, this isn't normal. This is, oh, it's normal to feel like you can't do all of this, because that's not what we humanly are
mhm,
capable of. And I feel like I would love to talk about, detecting burnout, because I think it can be a really challenging thing to catch ourselves, because we can just be in that loop of do more, be more productive,
mhm.
all of that.
Yeah, so some of the signs of burnout would be like just that bone deep exhaustion, that like I don't have any more in the tank. I mean, that's probably the thing people think of first. But then there's also like this jadedness, this world weary like sense of cynicism. It's sometimes called compassion fatigue as well. And it
Mm.
happens with a lot of helping professions, teachers, nurses, like clergy, in people who feel that a lot of their profession is about giving and caring for people, because they
Mhm.
tend to push beyond their limits.
Yeah.
Um, mm,
That makes sense. And I feel like this even
mhm,
reminds me of talking to someone in your family about those types of things. They're gonna reassure you if they can, or they're going to bring in their own opinions. So getting to go to
mhm,
therapy and have these conversations, I think, can also really help this, external person who's not in your day-to-day life provide some validation with that, and some reassurance that, like, it's okay. You are deserving
mhm,
of that. You can create, that space for
mhm.
yourself within your own life.
Mhm. And I think, like, that's so true, needing a neutral third party, needing to talk out boundaries with somebody who isn't going to be affected one way or another by you setting boundaries. You talked about
Yes.
like our close family and friends are going to be impacted by us learning to set stronger boundaries. And there can be some really big reactions to that, whether they want to
Yeah.
or not. You know what? Maybe they in their thoughts, they want their loved one to be able to have good boundaries. But in practice, when they start doing that and they realize, oh, you're maybe not there for me like you always have been. You're
Mm.
maybe, now I have to take responsibility of something I haven't had to take responsibility of. They can have a reaction that can spill over and then reinforce that guilty feeling. So there's a lot of management around all the fallout from setting boundaries too.
Yeah. Yeah, that having a therapist to go speak to, I think would really help through that entire process, not just the creating the boundaries, but, actually, because at the end of the day, me, myself, and I is the person who's in charge of, keeping those boundaries upheld. It's something I've
Mhm.
really learned in my own life that you can say you're setting a boundary, but it's your job to keep that in place and to keep that in practice when and if someone doesn't, abide by that or respect it. And so having someone like a therapist to talk to ongoing about that, I think, is what really helps in that process.
Yeah, that neutral sounding board where, like, you can share kind of those feelings that feel uglier to have, resentment, guilt, like all those things. You can talk it through and not worry about how that's impacting the other person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, I want to segue a little bit because a lot of clients you work with adults, but you also work with teens, and
Mhm.
you have 4 teens. Are they all currently teens of your own?
2 are well, one's, I guess, technically still a teen, she's 19, but I do have a 22-year-old as well, and then 2 almost 17-year-olds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So it's cool that you not only have children around this age, but also you work with clients around this age. And specifically, some of your specialties are working with teens and adults who are neurodiverse in some way,
Mhm,
whether it's ADHD, autism on the spectrum in some regard, lots of different ways that can show up. And then
mhm,
also being a part of the LGBTQ plus community, or you work with clients who, are close family members or friends are part of the community and help support them. So I'd love to
mhm,
hear a little bit more about your experience with maybe, you can go either direction because I know they're two totally completely different topics. But
mhm.
how does that show up in your own life and in therapy sessions as well?
Well, my kids are all neurodiverse, and LGBTQ as well. And so navigating, supporting them, being a person who has a brain who works a certain way in a world that wasn't built for that can make you feel like you're less than or flawed. Um, and so I really like to highlight the strengths of people who are neurodiverse and acknowledge the ways that our world falls short, like our society falls short of
Yeah.
supporting people. And I think burnout really does tie into this too, because a lot of they start to feel it in the teen years,
Hmm.
young adulthood, when you're going to post secondary and trying to like build an adult life, and then oftentimes later into adulthood too, that burnout when you're trying to balance parenting or and career and all those other things. You're not just dealing with that, the mental load and the workload of neurotypical people. You also have masking. You also have in the back of your mind, you're dealing with all this sensory input that nobody else would notice, that you're trying to filter out. You're dealing with, you have to work 10 times as hard to make a decision or set a priority.
Hmm.
So you're that much more spent at the end of the day. Um, and trying to appear quote unquote normal
Yeah.
takes a lot out of people. So I would say working through burnout with neurodiverse people is a way that intersects as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. So real. All of that. So real and
Mm,
so important to talk about. And I feel like specifically going to therapy and getting to have these conversations, especially when you are in your teens and going into your 20s and in that big transition into adulthood, it can be really,
mm,
really helpful to just have some assistance in that process of understanding your experience, of figuring out why you feel the way you feel and how society affects that. And, if you have thoughts to share about this, I would love to hear about, how teens navigate finding their own opinions in the world and stepping into, themselves outside of like a family unit in a school system.
I see usually teens know what their opinions are, and they're
Ooh.
once they feel safe about it, they are quite happy expressing them. And I think there's almost a relief there that they can have a safe person to express their opinions to. It's definitely a time of life and like brain development where they're starting to deal with questions of identity and autonomy. And that can be really hard to navigate um, between parents and kids. Like parents see this kid who's really doesn't isn't ready, isn't ready to face the adult world, and sometimes they panic a little bit, and sometimes they put more control on, which is natural to feel that way. And that can create this tug of war between the parents and the teen, where the parents are starting to let their teen, try things out, fail a bit in a scary world, let's face it. And teens are wanting more control and choice over their life than they maybe should have.
Mm.
Um, so one thing I like to address when teens come in, oftentimes their parents have dragged them in and they're not sure why they're there, or they're trying to fix you. But therapy is yours. This is your space
Mm.
to choose. This is your space to really explore who you are, what you think, to say whatever you're thinking and not have it immediately go back to your parents. Kind of like a sounding board, a venting space. And I always say, your parents have their ideas of what you're here for, and we can certainly talk about that. But this is your choice what you use therapy for. And oftentimes that helps them relax right into it. You almost see like this, oh, okay then. You're not
Yeah.
just one other authority figure in my life who's going to tell me what I'm doing wrong and try to fix me.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
That's really beautiful, and I love that you create that with teens and you make that very clear from the start, because I think that would change their entire experience, which is really, can make or break their whole opinion about therapy, and also be such an incredible tool for them to work through things that they can't talk through with their parents, or they can't really
Mhm.
express to other people in their life. So that's a really
Mhm.
beautiful way of explaining it, and holding that space for them. And,
Mhm.
if things also come up with questioning identity, questioning sexuality, questioning gender, it's amazing
Mhm.
that's also something you have a lot of experience with and are able to, chat and cultivate that connection with a client about to really explore.
Yeah, and having that safe space to talk about it, and I'm not I think a lot of parents kind of get scared about that other adults might be, like, pushing ideas or introducing ideas. But the ideas are there, the thoughts are there, and having a safe space to sort of explore it and to discuss, those feelings of maybe they're being feeling unsupported in other areas of their life, um, to be able to air that without feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe that doesn't even change anything, but it can help you feel so much better about it knowing you have a space to talk about it.
Mhm.
Um, is there's and this is another area where there's a lot of other mental health issues that come along with it. Like we know depression and anxiety are so high among the LGBTQ community. So it's so important for them to have a safe, non-judgmental, validating space just to be able to talk about things and to be able to explore, what their thoughts are, what their experience has been.
Mhm.
And I've found that to be really valuable. And I'm really glad when my kids get that, and it
Yeah.
doesn't all have to come from parents. There's no judgment there.
For sure, for sure. I
Mhm.
love that. And I also love your capacity to support people who also maybe not are a part of the community but have a loved one who is, especially if it's maybe
Mhm.
a parent or just someone who has someone close to them who's even newly coming out and
Yeah.
discussing their membership of
Mhm.
that community. I think it's a really, really helpful thing to be able to process that, especially when,
Yeah.
there's differences in education levels on the whole LGBTQ plus community. So clients being able to come to you and, be like, Erin, how do I navigate this situation? And
Yeah.
knowing that you have that experience professionally, but also personally, I'm sure is a very comforting thing.
Mhm. And that can be, a real case of, like, validating those feelings too, and not judging, right? Because when a parent or a loved one has found out, someone close to them, maybe their kid, maybe their spouse, maybe, somebody has come out to them, and it's shifted a lot of what their thoughts were, a lot of their perception of this person, a lot of their expectations for what life is gonna be like, and it's hard, they can't really talk about that fully openly with the person who's just come out to them. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
appropriate to do that. That's putting a burden on them that they don't need at that moment.
Hmm.
So being able to go to someone else and talk through, like, listen, this is not what I planned. This is not what I
Yeah.
expected. I don't know how to deal with this. And to have somebody go, that's normal to feel that way,
Yeah.
and I think too, there's, especially for parents, there's sometimes this element of grief that comes up, and there can be some guilt over that too.
Mm.
This sense of, maybe your kid is trans, maybe your kid, is now saying the gender you thought I was, that's not who I am. The name you gave me, that's not the name I want. And there can be a lot of grief, like the kid you thought you had doesn't exist. And it can be almost as difficult as a death, because
Mm.
now you're grieving what you thought you had, you're grieving what you thought you could look forward to, and embracing this new person who's part of your life.
Mhm.
Who's always been there, but maybe you didn't know this part of them.
Yeah.
You're learning who they are. Um, so it's really hard to integrate, those difficult feelings of letting go and processing the loss, and also, the curiosity and the wonder and the joy to come in learning about the new aspects of this person.
Yeah, yeah. That makes so much sense. And you brought up so many points that I've never thought about as someone who could be in that situation. So I'm really, really grateful you shared all of that. And I'm really grateful you are providing this kind of support to individuals. I'm so glad we, got to talk about this really in depth. Is there anything we haven't covered that you would love to mention for anyone listening who's someone who is interested in seeking therapy, thinking about booking a session for the first time? Yeah, is there anything I haven't opened the floor up for you to share?
Well, I mean, for people who are thinking about therapy and not sure about it, I just encourage them to go for it. And if it doesn't work out with the first therapist you try someone else. If you can. I mean, there are so many barriers to therapy, and I just want to acknowledge that. I would love, like, I'm a dreamer. I would love to see a day where everybody can access therapy the same as any kind of healthcare. Because mental health care is healthcare.
Mhm.
I would love to see that become included in provincial healthcare, because the research shows that when you attend to people's mental health, um, it affects every area of their life. It affects their ability to work. It affects their ability to raise healthy families that then don't go on to have more mental health problems. And having a healthy mind and healthy emotions can allow you to have a healthier body too. So taking away those barriers is something that I dream about
Mm.
happening, that everybody could access therapy, but also the stigma of it, like feeling like, do I need therapy? Am I bad enough to need therapy? And if I am, what does that say about me?
Mm.
And then also that piece of deserving to get better, deserving to take time for yourself, prioritizing it, can feel like such a defiant act almost.
Yeah.
So there's so many complicated things that keep people from therapy, but and for me personally, it took me a long time to actually go to therapy for myself. Once I did, I wondered why I waited so long. It's like,
Mm.
what held me back? Why didn't I do this sooner? I wish I had.
Wow. I love
Mhm.
that. And I appreciate that. And what an incredible way I feel like to wrap up this episode that we're chatting with on right now, because, you know, there's no harm in trying. Well, not that I don't want to say there's no harm. It takes courage. It takes bravery. It can be a really challenging thing. But I love that you shared that you were like, why didn't I start this sooner? Because when you feel that push, it's definitely worth exploring. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for chatting with me today, Erin. I want to make sure people know that you are available for sessions virtually. They can book a free 15-minute phone consult, and then all the information will be in the show notes, so people can click your booking link and find you that way. And yeah, I find I get to learn so much having conversations with different therapists, and I really, really appreciate all the topics we went into today. So thank you for your vulnerability and your openness.
That's amazing. Thanks for having me. I was really glad, privileged to be here.